Hey guys, are you somebody right now that's been looking to make a purchase of a home? You have the down payment, you have all or most of the closing costs, but the following things are stopping you from continuing. One being that you're self-employed, you write off too much. Second, just started a new job. Next could be that you have bad credit and you're working on it. Or lastly, it could be that you have an I-10 and it's stopping you from making that purchase. Now, what if I told you there was a way to get into a home through a rent to own program? If you're interested, stay tuned, okay? But before you do, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, that like button, and don't forget to hit that bell, and it'll alert you every time I put up a new video.
All right, guys, so I want to introduce you guys to a great friend of mine who happens to be a great lender here in the Rancho Cucamonga area with Pacific Lending. His name is I.T.I.N. Idris, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is I.T.I.N. I'm with Pacific Lending. I've been in the lending industry for quite some time now. I'd say at least 12, 15 years. Prior to that, I was in the banking industry for another 10 years or so. So yeah, been around the block in financing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the purpose of today's video is I'm getting a lot of questions about, about rent to own programs. And I know there's been your standard rent to own program. You're actually offering one right now that's a little different than your standard one. So tell us about this rent to own program that you have.
Correct, yes. So we have a rent to own program. It's actually offered through the FHA. So eventually the homeowner has the right to the property by either assumption or refinancing the home once they do qualify for it. So for example, let's say a client has the down payment but doesn't have a 2-year work history or just started a new job or maybe has bad credit and just doesn't qualify today, they can still get into the house and worry about maybe hitting their 2 years of income in 2 years or 3 years and maybe getting their credit score up and then eventually assuming the mortgage through an assumption or refinancing it if the rates are a little bit better at that time.
All right, so your example that you're giving right now is like if you started a new job or you have bad credit, you can actually have a house purchased and live in it for a certain amount of years and have an opportunity to own it?
Absolutely, yeah. So let's say you have the bad credit today. Let's say you're at like a 470. And let's say you're working with the credit repair company or you're just working on getting your credit score up. Let's say that's the reason why you can't get into a house. You have the income, you just don't have the credit. Well, let's say a year and a half later, you get your credit score up. Let's say you're in a 650 and you're like, hey, look, I'm there. I have my same income that I had before. I'm still qualifying income-wise, but now I qualify credit-wise. You could actually now assume that mortgage, just reach out to your mortgage servicer and say, hey, look, my income's there. Can you guys see if I can qualify for this house? I do. Great. You assume that mortgage. Or if the rates are better at that time, refinance it into the lower interest rate and the home's in your name.
So is there any kind of penalty for doing that? Like once you get your credit score up or you have your income to where it needs to be?
Absolutely not. There's no penalties for it. They actually want you to take over the house. That's the goal of the program. They want to get your foot in the door as the initial team to help you get into the house, and then eventually you're going to be taking over that mortgage. That's the end game.
Wow, that's great. Now, we did talk about this, a couple days ago, and another thing that you mentioned is for people with an I-10 number. There are actually people that can qualify for this with an I-10? Correct.
So I-10 buyers, typically there's programs out there for them right now, but those programs typically require a higher down payment, such as 15-20% down. They're gonna have to use their bank statements potentially to qualify. So this program works for I-10 buyers. So basically, they might be in I-10 status right now and maybe like 7-8 years down the line, they eventually get their social security numbers and they actually are like, hey, look, I qualify for a mortgage. They too essentially can assume the mortgage or refinance it at that point.
Wow, so what are some other examples? So you said bad credit, not having the 2-year history. I-10, is there anything else?
Yes, self-employment. So self-employed borrowers usually have sometimes a tough time qualifying for a mortgage because, hey, look, the past 2 years they wrote off most of their income, and when we look at their tax returns, they don't qualify. So this program is also great for them because we can actually look at their bank statements and say, hey, yes, you are making enough money. You just write it off, right? So this program helps them get into the door, get into the house they actually want at that time, and then eventually, once they show on their tax returns maybe a year or two later, or even if it takes 5 years for them, they could eventually refinance or assume the mortgage as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, this program as well, it's FHA, right?
Correct.
So it applies everything.
FHA limits apply to this. Down payment is still required. The down payment requirement for this program is 3.5% standard FHA requirement.
So an example would be if you're buying the house at $600,000, you would have to come in with a 3.5%.
Correct.
As your down payment.
Correct.
Plus closing costs, right?
Correct. Yes, and the closing costs are required. Down payment 3.5% and closing costs.
Now the closing costs depending on what market we're in. So if, for example, if we're in a buyer's market, we can actually ask the seller to either help with all of it or some of it. But again, it all depends on what market we're in. This market right now, we are still in the seller's market, but I have seen areas where in different parts of California where you can actually negotiate those closing costs with some of the sellers. So it's an option there for you guys as well.
Correct.
Now, walk me through, I guess, on how, if we put a deal together, right? We have our 3.5% down, we make an offer on the property, our offer gets accepted. What happens, and how does the whole thing work? Who's on title and so on?
Great question. So once everything gets put through and you're in escrow, the lender actually becomes the buyer in this scenario. So the lender becomes the buyer. There is a actual agreement that goes on title that shows that you as the buyer have option to purchase this house. How they do that is you have a 10-year lease option. So within that 10 years, you can figure out your income situation, your credit situation, your I-10 situation, whatever it may be that's holding you back from actually purchasing the house today. You actually have 10 years right out the gate to figure it out. After that 10 years, they automatically have a 5-year renewable lease. So it's about 10 to 15 years that it gives you to actually qualify for this house.
That's pretty great, man. Now, a question. So if someone bought a home today at today's interest rates, where they're like what, 7-ish, depending on the day. And if they decide to refinance or
assume
to assume that that their name on their title, what interest rates will they be getting in the future? So 2-3 years from now.
Got it. So if they're assuming the mortgage, they're going to assume the interest rate that they got today on that property. If the rates are better in 3 years, more than likely they're just going to want to refinance that house.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when they assume it, they're going to get the interest rate that they purchased it on. Well, if they bought it in 2024 and let's just say in 2026 they were able to assume the home.
Yep.
It's going to be at 2024's interest rate?
Correct, because nothing happens to the mortgage. It's the same mortgage that the lender actually got the house with. That's the mortgage that they're going to assume. So let's say the rates are better in 2026 in your example. They're going to want to refinance that instead. Right, so let's say they're getting a 6.5 today, and in 2 years it's at 4.5. They're going to want to refinance to get that 4.5 interest rate at that point.
Very cool. All right, so this all sounds really great and everything, but the question I know I'm going to get a lot from people, and I've asked you this too, what's the catch? Like, how does this program, what's in it for them?
Got it. So great question. It does come up a lot. Some people are skeptical about the program. So the lender itself actually does get some sort of benefit towards it. They have a 0.5% annual management fee that they tack on top of your interest rate. So that's what's in it for the lender. They actually do tack on a 0.5% annual management fee on there, and that's how they're making their money out of it.
Now, is there going to be one loan, 2 loans?
It is one loan that you're putting on the house. So it's not like a down payment assistance or anything like that. It's an actual true rent to own, lease to own program, helping you get your foot in the door. Once you qualify, you assume or take over the mortgage, the house is absolutely yours.
All right, so let me ask you this. Give us an example of, John Doe goes out there and buys a home this year, 2024, at say $500,000. What's the step-by-step process on that?
Great question. So they would come talk to us. We'll get them qualified. We'll see how their credit situation is. We'll see how their income situation is. So we'll we'll realize what's not working for them right now to get into a house. So if it's credit, we'll run their income information. We'll see how much exactly they can afford, and we'll qualify them based off of affordability. Once we get an actual home price number, what we'll do is we'll issue out an approval letter for that. You would get them into escrow. Once it gets into escrow, we close just like any other home. And again, let's say 3-4 years from now, let's say they're qualified at that point, they assume the mortgage or refinance into it.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this. So if, let's just say 5 years go by, 8 years go by, and they still can't qualify for it, and who knows, maybe they have to move somewhere. What happens with the property? And
great question. We actually get that asked a lot. So let's say John buys a house in 2024 for $500,000. Let's say 5 years go by, 2029, John still can't, either he still doesn't want to show income on his tax returns, or he never worked on his credit, and he just doesn't qualify still. But let's say John has to move out of state. So if John has to move out of state 2029, he can list the house for sale. And let's say the home is valued at $800,000 at this point.
And you bought it for $5?
And you bought it for $5. And let's say your loan balance at that point is $470,000. Well, John sells the house for $800,000. That $330,000 of equity that John has in that house, that's his. Wow. So despite never being listed as the actual owner of that house throughout the previous 5 years, he can sell it 5 years later and retain the equity on that property, and whatever he put down as a down payment and the equity, slowly going down, equity slowly building as he's making those payments, that's all his.
Wow, that's great. I mean, you can't beat that.
Absolutely, yeah. You're gonna rent or lease an apartment out there anyway. Why not be able to sell it at a profit down the line?
Right. So just to touch on some other things really quick. When they make the offer on the house, the program, they're purchasing the FHA. It's not cash, right? So you're gonna write it up as an FHA offer.
Correct, yes.
And
the lender does an FHA mortgage on that house, which again, you can essentially assume down the line or refinance.
And then title is gonna show the mortgager's name.
Title will show the mortgage company's name as the actual owner of the property, and they'll also put on there a purchase option for that buyer that they can assume or purchase that home at whatever price was agreed upon down the line.
Okay. Now, when you're in the home, you're living in the home already, can you just treat the home as if it's yours? Can you do modifications?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's your home, essentially. The end game here and the goal that the lender wants for you is to be able to take over that mortgage and call it your home.
Awesome. Now, another question too. I know this will work for any type of resale property. Does it work for new builds?
It does, actually. It works for new builds. It makes it a lot easier because the home is move-in ready already. Sometimes, let's say you're trying to buy a fix and flip property for this, it really won't work on that scenario because the lender wants to make sure that that house is move-in ready for you, and new construction, new builds actually come move-in ready. So yes, it works perfect for new builds.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, guys. Well, I hope that information really helped you out. For all the people asking about rent-to-own programs, this is a pretty awesome program. I mean, you're making money off owning this property, even though you're not listed on title. But if you decided to sell, you're making that equity. You're not sharing it with anyone else. Now, if you guys have any questions about this program, you can put it on the comments below, or you can reach out to me. My phone number is 909-576-1122, and I can put you in touch with Idris if he can help you answer any questions about this program and how you can qualify for this loan. Anything else you want to share, Idris?
Yeah, any questions, feel free to reach out to Christian. He'll get you in contact with me and love to help you.
Awesome. All right, guys. I'll see you guys on the next video.
Take care.